All right, here we go. We've made it to part three, our final video for outcome-based assessment. We've been through a lot so far already, trying to talk through all the different pieces along the way, and in particular, talking about how the whole idea behind outcome-based is that we're breaking things up into outcomes and giving students more than one opportunity to try and demonstrate what they know. We also talked about how when we're grading our students, we're gonna peg them at levels rather than being specific about a particular number. And again, that's within each outcome. Now, what we haven't had a chance to talk about yet is how we're actually going to record all this. What does it look like to try and record the student progress as they're working through an outcome-based situation? So we're going to talk about that today. And in particular, I'm just going to look at three different options. So Aspen, of course, we need to talk about that as an option. It's probably the easiest, actually. Quick glimpse at what a spreadsheet might look like. And the tool that I tend to use is FreshGrade. It has some drawbacks as well, but we're going to talk about that as well. So we're going to try and go through all three of these. I'm going to show you specifically through FreshGrade in a minute, but with Aspen, I was able to just do some screenshots to sort of talk you through what it would look like to set this up. Now, because we're doing things in outcomes and we're no longer including Kika as part of our breakdown in marks, that simplifies things a little bit, but might make things a little bit different in terms of how you're initially setting up your Aspen file. So as you're creating your course, keep in mind your average mode. We're going to set it to categories only. I think sometimes we would have set that to categories and assignments, but we're going to set it to categories only and use the 100-point scale, of course. When you get to categories, we don't really want a category, but we need to have something. So we're gonna create a category, add, and then just create a term category. So it really is a blanket category to cover all of the work we're doing in the whole term. So this is how I did it. Feel free to change it however you like, of course, but I just called it term. Um, the weight calculation was out of 100, and the total points, everything, all of the outcomes that we have will all be out of 100 as well. So that's the setup here. Now, when it comes time to actually create an assignment, this is the part that I found frustrating with Aspen. We're adding an assignment, but the assignment we're creating isn't like a new assessment. It's one of the outcomes. So this is what it might look like. I've created an assignment. Notice the category needs to be term. That's the only option, right? I want all of my assignments, say I have 10 of them, or excuse me, 10 outcomes. I want all of those 10 outcomes to be the assignments. So the assignments I'm creating are being created as assignments, but working as outcomes. So once I create it, I'm not creating more. I'm just going to create those 10 outcomes in there and then adjust the mark as we go. So what's frustrating from my perspective is that the the title isn't very long. You're only allowed 10 characters in that gradebook column name. So what I did was I called it outcome one, outcome two, outcome up to 10, or whatever it was. And then for the assignment name, that's more of my description for what the outcome was. So what you're looking at here, by the way, this is from my grade 11 course. So the first outcome was called understanding functions, right? Domain and range, that sort of thing. This works relatively well, but it's not super clear once you actually look at the gradebook. So here's a glimpse of what the gradebook would look like. And again, notice on the right there, it says outcome one, outcome two, outcome three. I wish that it was more specific there. I wish that it said, understanding functions instead of outcome one, but we're just limited by the program. What I want you to notice there is that within each of those outcomes, again, each outcome was created as an assignment, but we're using it as an outcome and just adjusting it as we go. But each of the students' marks are pegged at those different levels we talked about before, right? So level one's 55, level two is 65, and so on. And what happens, of course, at the bottom, we can see the class's average within each outcome. That can be helpful, right? To know if there's a particular outcome that would be worthwhile going back and spending more time on. And it is set up to still calculate the average of all of those outcomes. So that part will work too. To get the student's final mark, all it's doing is taking the average of all of the outcomes that we've entered. So that works relatively well. Now the next piece that I want to show you, sorry, that's Aspen. That's how Aspen would work. And pretty good, really. It's a relatively simplistic thing to go through. The other options I wanted to show you, we could choose to use a spreadsheet. And I like spreadsheets, so I had some fun playing around with this a little bit. If you're into spreadsheets and like trying them, they're pretty good. One of the benefits of maybe doing a spreadsheet in Google is you can share it with students so they can have access and sort of see the progress along the way. So doing something like this could work. Now, the reason I mention it is because you have a little bit more freedom now in terms of how you want to record your marks. So in the past, we've been very limited. We had to use Markbook before, right? Now we've had to use Aspen, and we had to put all of the entries in. Well, if we're making this move into outcome based and there's a better way for us to be recording and keeping track of students' progress, we're allowed to do that. And so what we could do is if we were using, for example, a spreadsheet or FreshGrade, like I'm going to show you in a moment, you can use that Markbook program to keep track of students' progress. And then in Aspen, rather than keeping track of everything, you could have just a final mark, like a midterm mark or a final mark. And all you would need to do is transfer the mark that you see for the student into Aspen. So Aspen will become sort of the tool that will allow us to upload the student mark into Trillium so that it gets recorded and put into report cards. But in a sense, Aspen would be all we're using the Markbook program for. There is just that upload and comments and learning skills, I suppose. So we could do all of the other work on the side in a spreadsheet or in FreshGrade. So again, a quick glimpse here at what a spreadsheet might look like. But other people I know are terrific at working with spreadsheets, and you might have a really nice system that you could do. Here's my preference. I really like using FreshGrade, but as I mentioned earlier, there are issues here, and I want to talk you through those and show you a little bit of how this works. If it's a program you're unfamiliar with, it's got some kinks to it, some things you have to be careful with. Order of doing things helps, that sort of thing. So here's what we do. You'll have to create an account. You can sign up. There's no cost to this, which is kind of nice. When you log in, there's two different versions you can log into. Classic login is the original program. This is what I still use. I really like it. And they also have this new version called Connect. Feel free to try it if you like, but I'm going to go back to the original. Connect is designed to do a little bit more than the original. Connect is sort of like a Google Classroom tied in with a Markbook program at the same time. They were really trying to make a lot happen at once. And for me, it just got overly complicated. All I wanted was a Markbook system, and the Classic works great for me for that. When you log in, you're going to have three options. I think I'm going to go ahead and close my window here. You're going to have three options. You log in as a teacher, student, or parent. Now, the advantage to that is that our students will have access to this, and even our parents can have access if we want them to. I just want to log in as a teacher for now, though. And I'm going to talk you through what it looks like to actually go ahead and create a class. So this is going to take a little bit of time. But so if you're not interested in using FreshGrade, turn the video off here. You don't need to see the rest. If you are interested in FreshGrade, keep watching and I'm going to talk you through some of the pieces for setting it up. Here's the idea. We're opening it up here. There's a few different tabs along the top. Gradebook keeps track of our actual marks. And portfolios lets us see what the kids are doing. But mostly we're going to be in this gradebook here. I'm going to show you what that looks like in a second. First off, FreshGrade, we're in our main menu. What we need to do is we need to create a new class. So we'll go here and create a new class. Our new class would be MTH1W, our new grade 9D streamed class. It's a grade 9 class, and our subject is math. And then we're going to import our students. Now you can do this in a couple of ways. You can put them in one at a time if you want. You can do the list here. I'm going to do a list of just a few of them. Now, here's the first. Well, this is the big issue, I suppose. FreshGrade has some security issues. that we're not confident about. And all I mean by that is that their servers aren't in Canada. And because their servers aren't in Canada, we're not allowed to record any personal information for students. And that's fine. We don't actually need that. So all I'm putting in is I'm going to put in first names and a last initial. And from my perspective, that's plenty for me to know who my student is, but it's not giving any information away. So we're not going to put any phone numbers or student numbers, not even last names into here, but it's enough for me to keep track. Go ahead and add these students. And there we go. We've got 4 students in my class. Now, if I go over here to gradebook, you can see that now I've got my students here, but I don't have any outcomes yet. So similar to how we did this in Aspen, I'm going to create an activity, and the activity is going to act as my outcome. So I'll add activity, and we could call it outcome 1. We could call it solving equations, maybe. Maybe that's our first outcome. It's going to be nice when we actually get our curriculum and we can start figuring out what our outcomes are really going to be. But you'll notice down here, we've got all these different setups for how we might choose to record these student marks. So FreshGrade's pretty good. It's got these options already on how we might choose to record student marks, 3-point scales, 5-point scales, but it doesn't have the mark program that we really want just yet. And so what we need to do is we need to create an assessment tool that we can use. So I've started creating this activity, but I've done it in a way that, darn, my assessment method isn't there yet. So I'm gonna cancel because I've gone too far. I needed to set up the assessment first. And again, that's one of the tricks to FreshGrade that personally I find a little bit frustrating. So we need to go back and we need to create this assessment tool. So to do that, you click on the FreshGrade button up here at the top left. And down here it says set up assessment tools. And there's already a few of them in here. You can take a look at them if you want. So for example, a 5-point scale looks like this. These are ones that they've already created. But I want to create a new one. I want to create one that we've designed that we're going to use throughout the board to try and maintain some consistency in terms of what these different levels might look like. So we click on New Tool, and this is what it looks like to actually create one of these for ourselves. So outcome-based assessment, let's call it that. That's our assessment tool. And there's options here. We can add new marks in. We can change the scale for everything. Of course, our maximum will be 100. That's the most a student can get. We can add new categories here. So I'm going to start you off here. Let's see. I want to do a mastery category. I like the blue star for mastery. And if a student achieved mastery, that would be 100 points, right? They'd have 100 out of 100. We need to fill that in for the rest of these as well. So level 4, which would have been exceeded standard, and the mark for that is a 90. Now, the color, I'll show you in a little bit, isn't super important, but it can help in a few places. I like to change this to a green. I'm going to go ahead and fill in the rest, but I'm going to pause the video for a moment because you don't need to see me typing all this in. Okay, so I've finished creating my assessment tool. I have the 7 different entries in here from mastery all the way down to not yet demonstrated. Now my assessment tool has been created. We're ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. It's a little bit tricky again. It doesn't want you to go back and fix it later. Once you've made it, you're kind of stuck with it. We've done it correctly. We're okay. So we're all set. We now have this outcome-based assessment tool created. So now we're ready to create an outcome. So I'm going to go back into my gradebook. Remember, we clicked on Add Activity. And let's do solving equations. We'll make a couple of these here, I think. Solving equations, we'll call that a particular outcome. If you want to get into some of these other things, you can add categories and objectives and resources. There's more you can do, but it's not necessary, so feel free to leave it at that. I need to change my assessment tool to the one that we've created. Outcome-based assessment is now listed there. And notice I have 4 students listed. Those are the 4 students in my class. So these 4 students are entered into this particular outcome. We'll save that. And we're in good shape here. We've got my 4 students. I can do some grading. I'll come back to this in a minute, but take a look. If I hit my arrow back, solving equations is now entered here. Right, that's now an option for us. I'm going to go ahead and add one more just so you can see a couple at the same time. Let's call this volume. What if we were calculating volume of objects? Outcome-based assessment again. Here we go. So now I have 2 different outcomes. Eventually we list all of them here. But these are the outcomes that we'd be assessing. Now, here's the nice part. This is how easy it is to try and actually adjust marks this way. So let's say Bruce is really good at solving equations. So if I click here, I can give Bruce level 4 in solving equations. And if I just click that, it'll update for Bruce, and we can see that he's at 4 stars. And maybe volume, that's an area that's a little bit weaker. Maybe that's just 2. So we can adjust it accordingly. Now notice for Bruce, it's showing his mark. That again is being calculated based on the numbers we associated with each of these levels. So remember, 2 stars was 65% and 4 stars was 90%. So it's calculating the average to give that 78. We can do the same thing for other students. Start entering marks here. Again, the mark calculation shows up. Notice at the top this color. These were the colors that we'd selected earlier. So green and blue, I'll put a blue in here, meant things were going well. Whereas our orange and reds meant students were having more trouble. So we can see it up here at the top. Gives you a bit of a picture of what outcomes students are being successful on and which aren't. So again, marks are showing up here. We can see that, which is kind of nice. Now, if you're using a computer, this is how you would update it. Turns out it's actually easier. Well, it's easier to create your file on a computer. So it's much easier to add students and create the outcomes, etc. But if you actually want to do some marking, it's a little bit easier to use either your iPad or your phone. So there's an app for FreshGrade, and it'll allow you to go in and you can take pictures and add more information that way. I can show you a little bit about how that works for a particular student. So if I go in here for Bruce, notice this is now Bruce's portfolio. This is just for him. So he's got information about all of the outcomes we have in so far. And I can go ahead and actually add comments. So I can put a comment in here about, so far we can only calculate the volume. This isn't very positive, is it? The volume of a prism. So we're making progress. Next step would be to work on cylinders, for example. So we can put that note in, and Bruce would be able to see that. I'd be able to see that, so I can look back and know how things are going. If you're using a phone or an iPad, you can actually take pictures of work. So if a student submitted something, you actually take a picture of it, and that picture will show up here, which is really nice. So in terms of trying to document the work that the students have done, FreshGrade is the winner for that one, because I can't do that particularly easy with a spreadsheet. I can't do that at all with Aspen. But on here, I can actually take pictures and record things and put them in particular outcomes. And that's a feature that I really, really like. And that's probably one of the reasons why, for me, FreshGrade is still my choice. The other thing you can do, and I'm about to wrap up here, but just to share it with you, and this is an option, you can use FreshGrade just for yourself and keep track of marks this way, but you can also add in students and allow them to have access to the program as well. The way you do that is you click Manage Parents, which seems like a really funny title, but that's the way you do it. And student access. So you get parent consent. I'm not sure why we have to get parental consent to let the student see this, but once we do that, we can get a code. And this is the code for students to be able to access their own personal version of FreshGrade. And if you go to print code, it'll pop up as a little PDF. and it has the code and explains to the students what website to go to or what app to download. Works really well, and they can then access it and see their progress in real time. Anytime you make an adjustment, they'll know it. I think that's fantastic. But what's even better about it is, although when we're in the gradebook, we can see a student's mark, we can see that 78%. All the student will ever see is their star level. So they'll know how they're doing within each outcome, but they're not going to actually see their overall percentage. Certainly, they can calculate it. It's not something we're trying to hide from them, but we're trying to promote that idea of focus on the learning, focus on things where you can improve, focus on be aware of the things you're really good at. It's helping to focus on what the kids know about their learning rather than being so mark driven, and that's kind of our intent there. So that was a bit of a whirlwind tour through FreshGrade. So again, the purpose here is just to see a few different options. You can use Aspen. Aspen works really well. If you're more of a spreadsheet person, spreadsheets can work really well. And FreshGrade is a great program too. It can work really nicely as well. So several different options for how you might choose to record your student progress using outcome-based assessment. Thanks again for your time. Appreciate you watching.